Hi there, welcome to this build of a 45-inch wingspan Quiver. Now the Quiver is a scaled down version of the iconic 1930s Quaker, and we're building this from a great set of plans which I've downloaded from the OuterZone website, and there'll be a link in the description below this video if you have a look if you want those. Now in today's video I'm going to be starting the covering process on the wings, and I'm going to be covering the wings in a laminating film to start with, just a very cheap and available film that's got its own glue and shrinks nicely, and this is normally used for laminating documents, but it's great for putting an undercoat on our wings before we put a tissue covering on. And I've got a great design I'm going to do with this, with the tissue, and I've got some lovely Japanese asuka tissue. So as I said, we're going to get the laminating film on in this video. Now I haven't got the radio gear installed yet, and what I want to do is I want to get the wings covered, I want to get the tailplane, rudder and fin and elevator covered. And then once I've got those covered, I'm going to mock the whole plane up with everything that can't be moved. And I want to see where the CG is naturally falling. And that will give me an idea as to where I put the radio gear to achieve the desired CG as specified on the plans, which is crucial if we want to have a good flight. So once I've got it mocked up with everything that can't be moved, if the CG is showing that it's tail heavy, then we need to get that radio gear forward of the CG. And conversely, if it's nose heavy, then we need to move it back a bit. But the first thing to do, and what we're going to do in this video, is get the wings covered, or at least the first stage, the laminating film. And I've got a roll of laminating film here. This is 38 microns thick. It's 320 millimeters wide, and it comes in 150 meter rolls. And now I just bought this off eBay, and it worked out at just over £19 sterling for this 150 meters. So you can see it's really cheap. And the good thing about it being cheap is if we make a mess and we want to take it off, we don't have to worry about the cost. But it's a great material to use despite its cheapness, and it shrinks lovely, it stretches nicely and goes on really well. We'll have a closer look at that in just a second. And I'm going to be using my Prolux digital covering iron, and I will probably do the main shrinking with the heat gun. Generally I don't like using a heat gun on covering films, but with laminating film I'm more inclined to do that, but we'll see how that goes. Now the first thing to do is to get this plane stowed away safely so we don't do any damage during the covering. Right, well, I've cleaned up the wing, I've sanded it and made sure there's no high spots or scratches or anything like that. I mean, this is the point of no return. If we're going to do anything to the balsa, we need to do it now because we're going to start covering, and it's surprising what shows up once you start to get the covering material on. But I've got this cleaned up nicely, so hopefully it will be okay, and I brushed it and vacked it so it's nice and dust free. Now let's have a look at our doculam. As I said, this comes pre-glued, which is heat activated just in exactly the same way as normal covering film, and we can see it's opaque, but that goes clear as we heat it up and shrink it. Now we've got the shiny side which goes up, and we've got the matte side which is the glue side which goes down. So first thing we need to do is I'm going to do the underside of the wing first. So I'm going to cut a piece, and I'm going to do to the center line or just past the center line. So we're going to cut a nice generous piece of this, and with a nice sharp scalpel. I've got a couple of scalpels here, different size blades, and it's worth having lovely sharp blades when you're doing this. It's not worth skimping. Now we've got the covering film or laminating film, and I always use loads of towels when I'm covering. One for the surface, partially so the surface I'm working on, partially so that I don't scratch the model as I'm doing it, but more so that it just stops it sliding around. It would slide a little bit more on my covering mats or on my bench. And I always use a towel just to support it, get it in the right position for the covering. And I've got another towel here which I can just put on here if I want, just to hold that a little bit firmer. So now we've got a nice stable working platform. And if I just move that a little bit to the end of the wings, there we go. I'll just redo this. It's worth spending a minute to just get this right, because we want to be comfortable when we're working. So now we've got the film mat side down, as I said, and we'll just place that over the wing. Now we could trim this so it's not quite as wide, but I will probably leave it. I think this stuff is really thin and the overlaps, the joins just disappear. What I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be doing the undersurface and just wrapping it round the front leading edge. In fact, what I think I might do is line the front leading edge with the edge of this film, so I don't need to cut that. So I just need to make sure there's enough to wrap that round, and it'll just make it a little bit neater, a little bit less jagged. On the back here, I will trim that once I've got it covered. So I will start to cover this in a second. I've just realised that my iron isn't plugged in, coming up to temperature, which is a bit of a nuisance. So let's plug it in and I'll wait for it to come up to temperature. Right, well my iron is up to, it's about 117 degrees C at the moment, and that's probably quite a good temperature to tack this on. Now when we're doing that, I've just lined up that front edge so it just laps around the bull nose a little bit. When we're doing that, we want to make sure that we're not ironing it like this to stick it onto this leading edge, because we're going to heat up areas here and shrink it. Much better that we don't shrink anything until we absolutely need to, and we just stick down. So I'm going to be holding this like this and just doing that edge there. Now, if we pull this down here, make sure we get this right. And what we want to try and do is get this as taut as possible. Obviously, if we pull it too much, we're going to introduce wrinkles, which isn't something we want to do. But we want to get it as tight as possible so that we don't have to shrink it too much. Now you can see I haven't cleared any of this, because look, if I just show you here, if we get it hot, it goes, oops, stuck it to the towel, we can see it goes clear. So the trick is to get this stuck on without heating it up at all, without heating the stuff on the open structure at all. And we want to be moving that way as we stick it. If we slide it along like this to stick it down, the film moves a little bit like a wave and you end up with a ripple and a crease. So much better to take it away from the structure that you're covering like this. I mean, we'll still end up with little bits of wrinkles and that you can't get away with putting this on without the odd wrinkle, but they will come out when we come to shrink it. I'm going to cut this a little bit shorter now so I can hold it a little bit better. I'm still going to leave it quite generous. Right, now I'm just going to tack in the centre here. Going to pull it, but not too much. Like I said, I don't want to introduce too much in the way of wrinkle, and pulling the film out with the iron. And I will now do this here. Now if we do get creases with this, it is so thin they often disappear, and we are going to cover this with tissue, which can be quite forgiving if needed. So let's get this on here. I actually quite enjoy using this as a covering material, not just because it does a really nice job with the tissue on, which it does, but it's just quite a nice product to use, and it'll actually take quite a lot of heat. You can see this is going on quite nicely. It's going to get a little bit tricky when we start to do that uplift that we've got on the end of the wing. Now I think we've got a little bit of loose here. I'm tempted to take that off and reapply it, but I think it'll be okay. I don't think we need to. I think it'll soon shrink out. Just want to stick it down to these spars because there's a change of direction here, so I'm going to end up with a little bit of a crease here if I'm not careful. Now just put a cut in that. That'll be better, I think. Okay, now we'll put a little bit of a cut in this, not too much. And we need to be careful when we're putting cuts in, because this is really strong stuff and we can pull it, but if we've got a bit of a cut like I've just put in there and we pull it too hard in the direction of the cut, it will rip. It will tear from that cut. Right, now I'm going to trim that end up in a minute, just level with that rib. But now I'm just going to go down here and make sure that is stuck on there. Okay, and I'm just going along, just rolling this on, and this fill now just comes to the very top of that bull nose, so we're not going to see this seam at all. Just need to be careful with this end a little bit. Right, now the final thing to do is to tackle this wingtip. So I just need to probably do the centre of the tip first. I'll just trim this again like I did the wingtip. It'll just allow me to grab it a little bit easier. So I'm going to get the centre of the wingtip here. Let me just move that around so that's comfortable. And I'll just zoom the camera in a little bit. Okay, so I'm just going to stick this on the wingtip there, right on the very end. So we've got that piece there nice and tight. I think the front's going to be the trickier bit perhaps, but I'm just going to work my way around there and see how this goes. I think you're going to have to trim it just back there. There we go. You can see that is now going on quite nicely. and we've got just a little bit of a wrinkle, and we've got a couple of little bits of wrinkles here, but they will soon disappear. I'll bump the heat up and we'll make sure it's well stuck down, and that will remove any wrinkles. See there, that's gone on quite nicely now. That's stuck. I'll probably just take this around, but I might do that perhaps on a slightly higher temperature. Let me just see how it goes. You can actually pull this stuff around quite nicely on curves, and hopefully you can see that is starting to pull round quite nicely there. So now we just need to tackle this front edge, and I will probably just move that around a little bit. Just thinking how I'm going to do this. There we go. I think if I do that bit first, I'm going to have to do what I said you shouldn't do, which is use your arm from this direction. But hopefully I won't catch the film. There we go. Yes, that's gone on nicely. So now let me just turn this around. It's I'm trying to get the best angle for me to work, but also trying to keep this in shot. So I apologise if it's not that clear at times. It's just sometimes I get sort of distracted with what I'm doing and forget where the camera's pointing. Okay, now that probably just wants a little bit of a tug there and a little bit more heat. Let me just move this around. There we go. Right, now I'm going to just stick this around the tip. A little bit of a pull just to get it round. Like I said, if you do end up with creases with this stuff, they end up flattening down really well because it is so thin. And let me just zoom the camera in so you can see what I'm doing a little bit more. And then once you get the tissue over, they really do just fade away. Now I'm going to bump the temperature up here. I'm still on 115. I'm going to bump the temperature up to 160. So we'll just need to wait for that to come up to temperature. Right, we're almost up to 160 degrees C. So, and what we're going to do now is we're just going to go round and make sure all the edges are well stuck down, and because it's a hot temperature, it will not only make sure they're stuck down, but it will shrink any of the wrinkles. And I don't know whether that shows up. We have got the odd bit of wrinkle on here, and I need to stick it down to this trailing edge properly. I haven't done that yet. But the first thing I'm going to do is just go around this wingtip and just bring it all the way to this top edge here, and then I will cut around there, and I'll have to be really careful I don't cut the underside as well and go through both, because that won't be good, will it? So, but like I say, this does stretch, so we just need to get it nice and hot and pull it around. I may, if I get some wrinkles, end up cutting it just a little bit shy of that edge, but we'll see how it goes. So put that on there. Should have left a little bit more here to grip, but just going to bump the temperature up just a little bit more. I'll probably take it up to 175. Right, we're on 175 degrees C now, and we'll finish just getting this stretched around here. And at this temperature it will stretch really nicely. Just have to get your fingers on the ribs for back here for a little bit of pressure, but obviously, you know, you got to be careful because we don't want to hear the sound of breaking balsa, do we? I just heard one of the ribs creak. So I'll put a towel on the back of this wing, which you won't be able to see, but it'll just help support it as I'm pulling. It won't slide quite so much. Now ideally I'd like to get a little bit more pull pressure on this, but I don't want to pull it too much and damage the ribs. And also when you pull it and it stretches, don't let go straight away. Just let it it cool down and the glue set a little bit so that it doesn't spring back. I think that will do for the wrapping, just to there. And I'll go back over now and just make sure that that is nice and flat. Right, now we've got that tip done, we're going to run down this back edge and make sure that this is nicely stuck down, and then we'll do the underside of the leading edge just to make sure there's no wrinkles in it. Right, now we've done that, we'll run down with the scalpel. Okay, so let's just make sure that is stuck down. Now when I do the top, I will probably just come around and just lap under there a little bit. There will be a little bit of a seam that will be hardly noticeable, and it will be on the underside. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to run down this back edge, and it's just going to get out any of the slight wrinkles that are along there. I don't know whether I can show that on the camera, maybe not, but I just go along and stick this down, and then it's ready for shrinking. But again, pulling out as much as possible. Once it's been stuck down, you can go along it side to side, but it's still better, I must admit, or I think it is, to go away from the structure. Okay, I think now we are done. Okay, right, now we can see we've got this panel covered, and to be honest, it's pretty wrinkle free. There's some wrinkles in the middle here, but very few, really, quite small, and they will soon come out once we start to shrink it. but I'm not going to shrink it yet. I'm going to do the other side now, and then we'll do the top, and then we'll shrink it all as one. And I think we'll probably do it gradually so we don't introduce any twisting, so we might do one side and then the other. We'll have a look at that anyway. But if I shrink it now, I'm liable to pull it off this back edge particularly, so I don't want to do that. So I will get the other side covered, and then we'll have a look at covering the top. Right, well, I've now got the underside done, and hopefully you can see that's gone on really well. And the other side, a few little wrinkles in this side. This was the first one I did, but this will shrink down lovely, and all those wrinkles will totally disappear, and it'll be nice and flat and tight. What I've got to do now is I'm going to move up to the top and do the wings in exactly the same manner. The only thing I'm going to do, I think, is I'm going to bring the film just onto that balsa there on both sides, and then I'm going to do that central panel separately. I think because of the change of angle, this way and that way, it's just going to make it really difficult around here, and it will end up with lumps or creases. And I think better to have just a single seam on either side. It'll be so much neater, and those seams really do disappear, and once the tissue's on it, I don't think we'll notice it unless we're really looking for it. So we'll have a look at this central section as I do it, but I'll get the two end pieces on first, like I say, exactly the way I did with the first piece. Something I realised as I was covering this, I didn't actually say why I was putting the laminating film and then the tissue. Why not just put the tissue on? And putting the laminating film on gives the tissue a lot of strength. It makes it really quite strong, and obviously a lot stronger than just the tissue. And it also allows me to put the tissue on using a polyurethane finish. I'm not going to be using dope, and so it's a lot kinder to the wing rather than dope, which once you've put it on, it's difficult to control how much it shrinks, and it carries on shrinking. With the polyurethane, once it's on, that's it, it's fine, it's done with. And I quite like the polyurethane. It's water based, and it doesn't smell. It's diesel and petrol proof, so it's a technique I really like. So anyway, I'll get on with this and get these two end pieces covered, and like I said, we'll then have a look at that central section. Right, I've now got these two top surfaces covered, and there's a few wrinkles in this one, but generally it's gone on really nice. And the wrinkles that we have got, I'm quite confident that they'll come out when we start shrinking it. Now, I've just come up to the edge of this central section. Hopefully that seam just shows up there, or at least, sorry, the overlap onto the balsa just shows up a little bit. And what I've done is now I've cut just a piece of 65mm wide film. I did shrink this along here to make sure it was a nice flat edge to stick this on. So I've got this 65mm wide piece of film, and I'm just going to stick that on, and I think this will make a much nicer job than trying to go onto those funny angles. So just stick that on, and I'll just run it down the centre at the moment. To be honest, I find all kinds of covering a lot easier on open structures than on solid structures. I always find it's a lot easier to get wrinkles on solid structures. Anyway, this is going on okay. Right, I've got this underside done now, and you can hardly see the seams there, and you can't feel them hardly. They're very small, and if you do get a bubble when doing seams like this, just burst it with a very nice sharp fine pin and just get the air out, just rub it and it should disappear. So I'm going to do this now. I'm going to shrink it, and I think I will probably, certainly the top, do with the hot air gun, because there's some good wrinkles here. One of the advantages I find of a hot air gun is that if I use the iron, I'm sticking it as I go and I'm compartmentalizing it so that you have sections that will shrink, and the shrinkage of this section won't help with the wrinkles here. If you do it with an air gun, you shrink it as a whole, and it seems to shrink more evenly and uniformly. So I could shrink all this lovely and it's all stuck down, and then there's not enough shrink in these two compartments to get that wrinkle out, whereas I could have used part of that to take it out sideways. So, right, let's get this hot air gun, but we do need to be careful that we don't burn through it, because we can do if we're not careful. And as we just prop this up, as we do it, we should see the film going clear. And just keep it moving. Right, now you can see that took a little bit more work around here to get those wrinkles out, and I was just very careful to do as much as needed really. There's a few little wrinkles just on the back here which I'm going to use the iron on when I've finished to get those out, but that seems to have gone on okay. What I'm going to do is probably, this is a sealed unit now, so it would be worth me putting in a hole on the underside where the film is double and so a lot stronger, because as we're heating it up like this, we're certainly putting pressure on the inside. So that'll be enough, just a single small hole in that double bit there, just to equalise the temperature. And all the ribs have got holes in them from where I made them originally, so the air will pass through nice and easily. So I've done that side now. We'll turn this over and we will do this side, and this has got this quite big wrinkle here. In fact, let me turn it around because I'd rather have that bit facing me so I can control it a little bit better, or see it a little bit better as I'm shrinking it. Right, is that in camera? Yeah, let me just zoom the camera in a little bit more. Okay. One of the things that I notice about shrinking this is it not only shrinks with heat, but it also shrinks as the film cools down. So you shrink it, even if there's a wrinkle that you haven't got rid of, it's worth taking the heat off and seeing if it goes as the film contracts and shrinks. Now hopefully, just check that the wing is still nice and square. Yes it is, which is always a relief. So I will get on now and do the underside, and then we're done. Right, I've now got this totally finished and ready to think about the next stage of the covering, and hopefully you can see that's gone on lovely without a wrinkle or anything. And if we turn it over, I'm really pleased with it. It's a lovely material to work with, and as I said earlier, if it all goes wrong and ugly, we can strip it off and start again, and we haven't lost a fortune. Now I can't wait to start getting the tissue on, and just as a sneak preview for the next video, these are the colours that I'm going to be using. So it's going to be nice and bright, but it is going to be a traditional design. And as I said earlier, this is Japanese Asuka tissue, and it's absolutely lovely to work with, really nice to go on the model. So anyway, I'm going to draw this video to a close now, and I hope you found it useful and interesting, and please come back and see how we get on covering this in tissue.